Three, two, one. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to
Lunch and Learn.
Not Lunch and Learn, to Daf Yomi. Wonderful to see you on this morning, and we are going to be completing the 9th chapter of Maseches Pesachim and starting the 10th chapter of Maseches Pesachim. And if you are actually looking at a page of the Gemara, you will see just how short the amount of text that we need to go through actually is. However, we will get it up on the screen over here, and also for you watching on YouTube, we will get it up over here, and then we can all see what we're talking about. So, yesterday's daf, almost the entire second side was the Mishnah that we are addressing with this tiny little segment of Gemara. So to perhaps briefly summarize yesterday's Mishnah, the question is, what do you do if different things happen to your Korban Pesach? What if you end up in a situation where you might be registered onto two different sacrifices? What do you do if the sacrifices get mixed up? So there's a whole load of different ramifications and permutations that the Mishnah discusses. But fundamentally, one of the principal pieces of advice is that people from one group have to kind of swap over and potentially re-register under a new group and vice versa, so that you can be sure that at least one person from the original Korban is eating the Korban Pesach that they would have been registered for. So, for example, if you've got, 10 people in group 1 and 10 people in group 2, and then the Korban Pesach gets mixed up, so then all you do is you just take one person out and put him in the other group, one person out and put him in the other group, and then when you end up with whichever Korban Pesach you end up with, you've got at least one person from the original Chabura, from the original group. So that's what the Mishnah had told us yesterday. If you've got korbanos of two different groups which get mixed up, so one member swaps over, and then they can bring the korban on the condition that if it belongs to their group, then the new fellow should be mixed in, and if it belongs to the other group, then they've moved over, and now you can be sure that everyone is getting the right thing. And then it extended this even further. It branched this out even further. What if you've got 5 groups? Right, in the Mishnah talked about 5 groups of 5 people each. So what if you've got 5 groups, and now this Korban Pesach, any one of these 5 groups could need to have been registered for one of these 5 Korbanot Pesach. So in which case, everybody, one person from each group now has to make a condition that if I'm meant to be with this group, then this should be my korban. If I'm meant to be with that group, then that should be my korban. If they're meant to be with this group, then that should be their korban. So what happens is that you get everybody, hopefully, statistically, latching on to the korban that they were actually registered for. And then, yeah.
So I'm just. This is a kind of a more of a general question. I like to ask general questions.
Sure.
This is about, in today's world, when what you're describing as people being organised in groups is something that we do every day because we have the technology to do it. Even 50 years ago, we don't have the same technology as we did today. We're talking about a long time ago in terms of organising people into groups.
Yeah.
Without any kind of technological modern sophistication that we know today. So much of this relies on that. I don't know. I don't quite got my head around all this registering. I think I said this a few weeks ago, registering, and now the re-registering and swapping around of groups. I think, and I guess my question is, it relies on people's total honesty in declaring that they have become impure, etc. Was this? I guess this was the kind of culture that pervaded.
So.
It's just very hard to understand the way that it was organised, so well.
Yeah, I guess at the heart of it, people did care, and it was important, and they wanted to get it right. You mentioned impurity. The whole culture, the society was built around purity and staying pure, and there is a vast difference in terms of people who sell products. People who said that their livelihood could depend on their state of purity. So it was important to people, and that's why they put safeguards in place. It's a bit like now people's reputations are at stake. So now in the Me Too culture and cancel culture and all that kind of thing, so people put safeguards in place to make sure that they're never put in compromising situations, because their whole livelihood and their whole career can rest on one wrong move. So back then, their career rested on their ability to be upworthy individuals with regards to Tumah and Tahara. And if they couldn't be trusted to keep things pure, or if they couldn't be trusted to tithe their produce appropriately, they would lose business. So the whole society was built in that way, and that's why we have these this compartmentalization of whether somebody was the word is chaver, someone who could be trusted, or whether they were an am haaretz, somebody who could not be trusted. And there were safeguards in place for both types of people. So it was important to them, and so they had the right societal safeguards in place. And with regards to the registration, I can't say with great certainty, but it's basically families saying we're spending Yom Tov together this year, and we all have to be, at least mentally signed on for the fact that we're going to enjoy our Korban Pesach together. So I imagine that, in the absence of Google Forms and the absence of United Synagogue booking websites, or Eventbrite, whatever it might be, people were able to just say, yeah, well, we're going to be together for Pesach, so I'm in on your Korban Pesach. And then because that was important to them, that would be all that was needed. And then if someone was not pure for Pesach, then they had the safeguard in place that they could bring a Pesach Sheni. And so it wasn't like, I need to just pretend that I'm pure so that I can still go ahead and do it. There were knock-on effects and ramifications. It's a little bit like COVID in that sense. If someone discovered on Erev Pesach that they've got COVID, so they know that if they go and spend Yom Tov with their family now, they're putting others at risk. And as hard of a decision as that is, you don't want to do that, so you'll stay home. And a similar kind of level of responsibility would have been expected from people back then if they knew they were Tamei. So do I just be selfish and go and spend Yom Tov with my family knowing full well that I'm going to contaminate and infect them all, which will have a knock-on effect? Or do I just say, no, fine, I'll have to just go into isolation for Yom Tov, because it's not fair to everyone else for me to spoil it for them. So, people cared about each other back then, and as difficult as it would be, you saw the impact and you saw the ramifications of your actions. So that's the way that I see it. I don't know if that resonates, but that's the way that I see it. All right. So then we also saw an example of two individuals whose Korban Pesach got mixed up, and the solution over there is you actually go and find random people who haven't registered for Korban Pesach to join with, and that way you can do your conditions and your statements like that. So now the Gemara is going to bring us a machlokes. So we're at the top of 99a, Tzadi Tes Amud Aleph, and we're going on this point in the mission of Shanaim Shnis Arvu Pischehem, two people who got mixed up, and they're going to have to find random people on the street to register on their Korban Pesach with them, and then they're going to effectively extend the Korban Pesach to either one of these two individuals. So the Gemara says as follows: Lema masnisin delok Rabbi Yehuda. Let's say that this point in the Mishnah is not in accordance with Rabbi Yehuda. Now, what does Rabbi Yehuda say? Rabbi Yehuda is going to say that you have to have at least one member of the original band, right? You're going to have one member of the original registration attached to the Korban Pesach. Otherwise, it's not going to be valid. It's a bit like, if you chop and change the Beatles and you end up with Beatles testimonial or tribute acts, and there's not one single person left from the original cast, so then it's not the Beatles. All right, so the same with the Korban Pesach. If you don't have one original member of the band, then it's not going to be a registered Korban Pesach. So the Gemara is going to contend that this statement in the Mishnah of Korbanos, where two people get mixed up and they take in a new member and then they switch places, that's not going to be like Rabbi Yehuda Tanya, because it says in the Gemara, quoting a pasuk, "V'im yimayit habayit mihiyos Moshe." It says, It says in the pasuk, "And if the household be too little for a lamb," which teaches that people can keep signing off, can keep removing themselves from a particular Korban Pesach. So melamed shemis martin v'holchin, that you start off with 10 people and one person splits off, so now you've got 9, and then you've got 8, and then so you can keep removing people from a Korban Pesach registration. But as long as you still got one person from the group, one of the original members is still signed on to that Korban Pesach. So even if you've only got one person left who's going to enjoy this Korban Pesach, you can keep diminishing the size of the group. Maybe people need to sign on to other korbanos for different reasons. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi says that you're allowed to keep withdrawing as long as there's somebody left on that Korban Pesach. As long as you don't completely forego this Korban Pesach and leave it completely unregistered for, then that's going to be okay. So that's why we're going to say that this clause in the Mishnah about swapping people out is not going to be like Rabbi Yehuda, because the supposition is that you are now disbanding from your Korban Pesach, leaving someone else in place, this random person from the street, but you've left no member of the original group attached to this Korban Pesach. So it's not going to be like Rabbi Yehuda. But comes along Rabbi Yochanan, I'm a Rabbi Yochanan, afilu tema Rabbi Yehuda. You could even say that it is in accordance with Rabbi Yehuda's position. Kevan da'amar Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda said, "In shechetin es pesach al hayachid meikara la'amnuye acharina bahadei kai ukeechad bibnei chabur dami." Because Rabbi Yehuda says that you can't slaughter a Korban Pesach for an individual, meaning there has to be at least 2 people signed on for it, and so you can't. So you can't slaughter the Korban Pesach for an individual, because from the beginning it had to have somebody else appointed to this, and so the person who is joining afterwards is considered like the original member of the group. So if you've got one person who is registered for a Korban Pesach and it gets mixed up with another individual, and then you go and find these people on the street. So because you can't have a Korban Pesach with only one person, these random people from the street are going to be considered like the original members of the group. So in that instance then, Rabbi Yochanan is telling us that actually this Mishnah could go in accordance with Rabbi Yehuda, because you've still got original members. Amar Ravashi, Ravashi says, Masnisin namidaika. You can even read this into the words of our Mishnah elsewhere, to Ketani, because it said in the Mishnah, V'chein chamesh chaburos, if you've got 5 groups, shal chamisha, and each group has got 5 people in it, then, am I freezing for people because it's telling me my internet is unstable? I'm sorry for that.
Yeah, you do now and again.
Oh, I'm really sorry. We just got this new router, so it should be working better, and I'm sorry that it's not. So Rav Ashi is saying that when it says in the Mishnah that you've got 5 groups, and each of those 5 groups has got 5 people in it, then the crossing and changing can work, right? And the implication of this is that chamisha in, that if you've got 5 people in each group, then it can work. But if you've got some with 5 and you've got some with 4, then you can't make it work. It's not going to mathematically be possible for all of these 4 members to join into 5 groups, and so you're going to end up with a Korban Pesach without one of its original members. So the Gemara asks, Lav mishum de lo farish chad b'mnei chabur gabe. So is it not the case that this solution of swapping people around isn't going to work because you will have one group which doesn't have an original member? And the Gemara says, Shema Minah, yeah, you would indeed learn from that. And so that is why the Mishnah concludes that this could be the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, because when you swap these people over, they are considered to be like the original member of a group. And with that, we conclude the 9th perek. So do join in with me, fellas, and say with me, Hadran alach, mi shehaya tameh, uslik ala Pesach sheni. Hadran alach, mi shehaya tameh, uslik ala Pesach sheni. Hadran alach, mi shehaya tameh, uslik ala Pesach sheni. So we will return to you the chapter of Misha Hayatame, and we say also Uslika la Pesach Sheni, because these last few chapters have all been about the Korban Pesach and about Pesach Sheni, and we have now concluded that element of Maseches Pesachim. So Mazel Tov everybody on completing the 9th parak, and we go straight in on page 99b with the first Mishnah of the 10th chapter, called Arbe Pesachim. And this is going to lead in now in relatively, chronological order, the actual Seder. But before we get to that point, we have a very interesting Mishnah and a very interesting Gemara, which does have practical ramifications to the way that we lead our lives today. So the Mishnah says, Erev Pesachim, Samach Lemincha, Lo Yochal Adam Asher Techshach. So on Erev Pesach, when you are Samuch Lemincha, now Samuch Lemincha means that you are 9 hours into the day. So we've mentioned before that the day is split up into halachic hours. So from the moment of sunrise, from the moment of chatzot in the nighttime, you're starting to count, and around about the 6th hour into the day is when we can't say the Shema, and that doesn't mean 6 o'clock in the morning. That could mean 9 o'clock in the morning, whatever it is. So when we get to the 9th hour of the day, which is just as we are getting close to the time when we can bring the mincha offering and daven mincha. So the Mishnah says, Lo yochal adam ad shetechshach, that you can't eat. You can't eat on Erev Pesach until it gets dark. And the reason is because we want to get to Seder night with a healthy appetite to do the mitzvah of eating matzah. Afilu anisha beYisrael lo yochal ad sheyesed. Even a poor person should not be eating until he is reclining. So even for a poor person to who may otherwise feel extremely constricted and extremely imprisoned in their poverty to the point that they don't feel particularly free on Seder night, they're supposed to recline as well at Seder night. They're supposed to put themselves into this frame of mind of being free. And the Mishnah says, "V'lo yivchasu lo me'arba kosas shel yayin va'afilu min hatamchui." And no person should consume less than 4 cups of wine on Pesach night, even if they are accepting handouts from the community charity funds. Everyone has to be accounted for, and everybody has to make sure that they have enough for 4 cups of wine. So that's why, by the way, we have in the run-up to Pesach the famous Kimcha de Pischa, the flour of Pesach, meaning that we increase the amount of charity that we collect and that we give in order to be able to help everybody in the community with funds to be able to afford food for Pesach. And that's because everybody has to have, the bare minimum. We have to communally make sure that people have enough. So the Gemara asks, "My area Arvei Pesachim." Why does the Mishnah say that this rule of not eating until it's nighttime, until the Pesach starts? Why does the Mishnah only say Erev Pesach? Afilu Arvei Shabbosos v'Yamim Tovim nami. Even on Erev Shabbos and Erev Yom Tov, this same principle applies. The Tanya, because it says in the Baraisa, "Lo yochal Adam Arvei Shabbosos v'Yamim Tovim min hamincha ulamala kedei shikanes l'Shabbos kashu taiva dibrei Rabbi Yehuda." Because Rabbi Yehuda said that when it comes to Erev Shabbos on a Friday or any Erev Yom Tov, you're not supposed to eat from mincha and onwards, because we're supposed to come into Shabbos and we're supposed to come into Yom Tov. Am I freezing again? Yeah, we're supposed to come into Shabbos and we're supposed to come into Yom Tov in a state of appetite. We're supposed to be a bit hungry because that will enhance and help us to enjoy those experiences more. So really the Mishnah could have talked about any of these things, but it for some reason singled out Pesach. So that's the question of the Gemara. And Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi has a different opinion, that you can carry on eating until Shabbos or Yom Tov comes in. Now, halachically, it could be that I don't know which way around we paskin halachically, but it is an interesting concept that people do take seriously, not to eat after a certain point on Friday, so that they've got enough of an appetite to enjoy Shabbos. So worth keeping in mind. Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna says, "Lot saricha ela l'Rabbi Yossi da amar ochel v'holech ad shetechshach." So Rav Huna says that the Mishnah said Erev Pesach because of this opinion of Rabbi Yossi, who said that you can continue eating until dark. So to Rabbi Yossi, Hani mili ba'arvei Shabbosos v'Yamim Tovim. Rabbi Yossi only holds that for Erev Shabbos and Erev Yom Tov. Aval be'erev Pesach mishum chiyuv d'matzah moda. But even in the world of Rabbi Yossi, because of the importance and the obligation of eating matzah, even he would agree that you shouldn't eat on Erev Pesach, Samach Lemincha. Rav Papa says, Afilu Tema Rabbi Yehuda. Rav Papa says that that you can even say that this Mishnah is like Rabbi Yehuda, and Hasan ba'arvei Shabbosos v'Yamim Tovim min hamincha ulamala huda'aseh. But when it comes to Erev Shabbos and Erev Yom Tov, you're only not allowed to eat from the point of mincha and onwards. But samach lemincha shari. But when it's just before, when it's close to this time, then you would be allowed. Aval be'erev Pesach, on Erev Pesach, afilu samach lemincha nami aser. Even if it's a bit before this time, this 9th hour, it's going to be prohibited to eat. Asks the Gemara, over Erev Shabbos samach lemincha shari. But is it actually allowed to eat? Are you actually allowed to eat if it's samach lemincha? If it's just before this Mishnah time, this mincha time? V'hatanya lo yochal adam be'erev Shabbos v'yamim tovim mitesha sha'os ulamala. That you're not allowed. The phrasing in a different brisa, in a different source, says that you can't eat on Erev Shabbos or on Erev Yom Tov from the 9th hour on and onwards. Kadei shikanes l'Shabbos k'shehu taiva divrei Rabbi Yehuda. It quotes Rabbi Yehuda's opinion as saying that you can't eat from the 9th hour and onwards. Rabbi Yossi Omer, afilu v'holech ad shetechshach. And Rabbi Yossi, who had said to us that you can carry on eating until it is dark, then it's going to be okay. But here's the thing: mincha, the time for mincha starts from. Oh, I've got this completely backwards, by the way. The 9th hour isn't like early afternoon; it's kind of mid-afternoon. It's close to mincha katana, which is 9.5 hours into the day. And so when it says from the 9th hour, which is kind of mid-afternoon, my apologies, I really got that, I think, a bit skew-if. So this phrasing in the Baraisa says that you can't eat from 9 hours and onwards, which is mid-afternoon, but from 9.5 hours, the implication is that you would be able to eat. So So that's where this challenge is coming from. So Amar Zutra says, Man le malam de mitar tzatahi. Who are we to say that this version of the Baraisa is accurate? And then turning over to the next time, maybe there's a corruption, there's an error to this Baraisa. To which the Gemara answers, Amale Marima v'yesema Rav Yemar. Marima, and if you want, you can say it was Rav Yemar. Ana iklai lepirkei de Rav Pinchas berei de Rav Ami. I went to the shiur of Rav Pinchas, the son of Rav Ami, the kamtan of a Tani Kame, and he got up and he taught this Baraisa, the second version, about 9th hour, the Kiblamene, and it was accepted. So that means then that the other source that we had brought about Samach LaMincha and from Mincha and onwards, that we've got a bit of a problem. So the Gemara says, Ihachi Kasha. If so, then we have a problem. To which the Gemara answers, Rather, we go back and we say that it's clear that the Mishnah is understood in accordance with the opinion of Rav Huna, which, in other words, a person is which was that a person on Shabbos and on Yom Tov can eat up until it gets dark, but on Erev Pesach, he would agree that you can't eat from the time of Mincha, Katana, and onwards. So it's an interesting concept, leaving ourselves with an appetite for Shabbos, leaving ourselves with an appetite for Yom Tov, and it's true we're not supposed to eat on Erev Pesach officially, really. In order to, it's a good thing to do, to leave ourselves with an appetite for Seder night. So here we go, guys. We are a month now before Pesach, and we're about a month as well from finishing the Maseches Pesachim. So I'll take this opportunity to wish everyone a wonderful and meaningful day, and we'll see you next time on Daf Yomi. Take care, everyone.